Andy asked Polly, are you going to make an honest woman out of Dolores? And then Frankie says, to everyone's surprise, by the way, he says, Dolores doesn't want to get married. I thought that was interesting because on the show, she definitely acts like, this is like the next step between her and Polly, right? And by the next step, I mean like in the near future. That's the impression that she gave me while she was on the show. Another thing is, the entire season, I don't know if it's because it didn't make the edit, but at no point in time does Dolores tell us that Polly is married. Like she says, oh yeah, he's still very close to his ex-wife she calls every day. She says ex-wife, right? Well, she's not your ex-wife. You're still married technically. So, I'm just saying it could just be like a technicality at this point. But she never said while she was on the show that she was, she won't be able to marry Polly because Polly is unavailable. Polly is married still, right? So anyways, the only thing that I can think of is at some point in time when Frankie is talking to Joe Gorga on the phone and said, I met up with Polly and Brittany and we kind of had like a sit down and we talked and, everything is good. Like, so I'm going to come to the party, yada, yada, yada. And then he kind of says to Joe Gorga, oh, Polly told me that he has a ring already picked out for Dolores. And then Melissa says, oh, so do you think that the party, do you think it's going to be like an engagement party or something? And then the way Frankie, if you go back and watch that episode, the way Frankie answers that question, he says, I would doubt it. I doubt it. But he kind of said it in a way that maybe he knew already that Polly was still married. And that's why, a wedding is not in the works at this point between Dolores and Polly. So that's just my take on that. But so then at that point, Andy asked the question. I think he's asking the question to Dolores about little Frankie and his business with Louis. So then Dolores proceeds to answer, oh no, Frank says he no longer works for Louis. And then Dolores said, yeah, he worked for him for some time. He doesn't, work for him anymore. He has a different job. And she's basically trying to just, push that narrative. Then you have Joe Gorga saying, is that true? Is that true? That's it. Isn't there anything else? And then at that point, Dolores, she becomes very defensive and she's just like upset, And then, to be honest with you guys, I feel really disappointed in Frank Catania and in Dolores as well. Because Frank basically told us what happened, in that segment where he's doing construction with Joe Gorga. And then in the men's room, just before they were about to enter, he says what happened, what transpired between little Frankie and Louis. So for Dolores to sit there and just be like, no, nothing happened. He has another job and he's very happy and I don't want to discuss my son. And for Frank Catania to just be like, I'm not going to speak on it first. Like, I'm not going to be the first one to talk about it. And then basically they kind of like agree to just squash the topic of Frankie Jr. So I was really disappointed in that because you could tell it's just one of those moments where that Dolores is lying. I've said this before. I find that Dolores does not tell the truth. She's on this show. She's protected. People just keep their mouth shut when they're around her for some reason. And I don't know why Dolores didn't go to bat for her own son. I understand her wanting to protect little Frankie and his job and all of that, or his reputation. But here's the thing. I think that Dolores she could have handled the situation differently. She could have said, you know what, don't insult everyone's intelligence because everyone knows that you're lying. Everyone that is sitting with you on the couch and everyone that is watching you on TV. So we know your body language is telling us that you are not telling the truth, right? Everybody knows that there's more to the story. and you refuse to acknowledge that there was a problem with Frankie's employment while he was with Louis. So I wish Dolores would have just said, listen, something happened with the business. I was not particularly happy with the way that things were handled. I brought up my concerns to Teresa and Louis. We discussed it. Now Frankie has a new job. It's in the past. We're good now. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. At least acknowledge that something happened. You don't have to tell us what happened exactly, although we have our suspicions because, there was a lot of chatter about that. And if you go back to my previous episodes, not the previous one before this one, but some of my episodes, I do cover that. And, the whole situation with Frankie Jr. and Louis. So I just wish that Dolores would be more honest. I wish that Frank Catania would have stood up for his son on national TV and just be like, you know what? No, Dolores, I agree with you for everything else that you say, but on this particular matter, I'm upset because the only thing I was expecting from you, Louis, don't ghost my son. He's a kid, not a kid, but you know what I mean. Don't ghost my son. If something if your business, if there's a problem with the business, just pick up the phone like a man and call him. Don't keep him hanging. I wish they said that, but they didn't. So that's why, I don't feel like they're honest when it comes to that. But anyways, on the other hand, though, I feel like John Fuda, because, Andy goes in, he's like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to get to the bottom of that story. And you could tell that Andy doesn't believe Dolores. And I'm happy, actually, that he did call her out and say, why are you upset? Why are you upset? If there's really nothing, why are you defensive? Why are you upset? And she's like, well, I just don't want to talk about my son. Well, Dolores, if you don't want to talk about your son, we do see him on the show. You are on a reality TV. You have to expect that people will ask you some questions once in a while. Doesn't really make sense to me when people say that, but whatever, I digress. So when it comes to John Fuda, that's one person, and I said, I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10. The guy came ready. He was ready. When it was his turn to speak, he spoke and we heard him. Okay. Because Andy said, okay, so what's the deal with, that situation or whatever. And then he goes on and says, why did you get me investigated? Basically, he's talking to Louis and Teresa, and they go into it a little bit at that point. John seems very confident with the information that he has received. So basically, to make a long story short, someone from Louis' camp tried to contact his ex girlfriend. He was not married to her. So basically, the mother of his first son, Jaden, someone from Louis' camp tried to reach out to her while she was in prison or in the halfway house to get some information or to get her to do an interview or something like that. So John has this big yellow envelope, it seems to contain a lot of paperwork, and he's just like, no, I know what I'm talking about, and I got your number. He seems quite confident when he's talking to Louis about it, and he's like, why are you doing this? Why are you digging up information about me and my family? And you could tell he's really upset, and he's ready. He was ready at that point. So big kudos for John Fuda. The whole season, I can't say that I was, a fan of Rachel. I didn't really have a strong opinion about her. I barely talked about her throughout the show. But one thing about her husband, I liked her husband on the show, but this episode right here, the reunion, solidified my view on John Fuda when it comes to his position on the show. Because I feel like there's a lot of things that you can let go of, that you choose not to discuss, and you could just be like, yeah, whatever, we're not going to talk about that. That's water under the bridge. It's not worth it, whatever. But when it comes to the subject of your kid, you shouldn't hold back. Because if you're not going to stand up for your kids, then it means that you're not going to stand up for anything. It's over. It's over. Right? So I'm glad that John didn't do that and that he actually gave us what we wanted. Confront Louis about it. Right? So Big kudos to John for that.